Hi friends! My name is Angie and this is the first day of the Jante's Inferno readathon. This year is the year that I get out of hell. I am determined. I am going to make it happen. And this readathon came at the perfect time because I'm currently in the middle of another book. This is What We Can Know by Ian McEwan, and I'm reading this book for book club and I've been struggling a lot with it. Like conceptually, it's really interesting. It's about a historian looking back on like our present time and like making sense of our society. It's kind of like that short story, the Nesirima in a lot of ways, but it's written so dryly. It's written like a bad textbook that it's like agony to get through. So I'm hoping this readathon kind of like jumpstarts my reading again because this has stalled me out in a really bad way. And also, not only is it the first day of the readathon, it's also the day before my birthday. I have a new tradition, and by new, I mean it's exactly a year old, but I like to take the Friday before my birthday off, and on that Friday, I like to get myself a facial, get myself a lunch, and see a early afternoon showing at my local movie theater. Unfortunately, this year, that's not gonna happen, and that's because I'm an adult. And I have responsibilities and I have things that I need to do because all week I had a standing appointment on Friday, but it was like never confirmed what time this appointment was. And in my little brain, I envisioned this appointment happening first thing in the morning because I told them I'm available first thing in the morning, we can make it happen. And if it was first thing in the morning, that means the facial is off the table. With facial off the table, I was already kind of bummed, but I was like, I always have movies. There's always cinema. But then the place finally called me and they said, the earliest we can get to you is the early afternoon, somewhere around 2 p.m. And I said, yeah, sure, that's fine, obviously, because I need to get this done. But that brings movie off the table. And so now without facial or movie, I'm kind of at a loss of what to do today. And in a lot of ways, this kind of serves the readathon and serves me in escaping hell this year because like I have so much more time to dedicate myself to reading. But in other ways, I'm very disappointed. In order to kind of not bum myself out too much, I'm gonna try and pivot today. We can go to the local bookstore, maybe even the local yarn store, check out what they have, and even perhaps the local like witchy store. I can't guarantee that I'm gonna get anything at any of these stores, but you know, it's just like something to get me out of the house and like look at pretty things. So that's my plan for today. We're trying to make something out of a whole lot of nothing. And ain't that what life is all about? I have been having a week. I have been having the week of all weeks. And because it's been so relentless, I haven't really been in the mood to be on camera. So I haven't been doing as consistent as updates as I probably would have liked. But we're back, baby, and we're here. And we have some updates. And so I haven't talked to you since Friday, the first day of the readathon, and now it's Wednesday, the tail end of the readathon. So like we have a lot of things to catch up on. The first is that we finished Bones and All. I ended up giving this book 2.75, 2.5 stars. Like I don't really know how I feel about it, but I do know that I didn't love it. And I'm sorry to be that guy, but I do think that the movie was better. And I do think the changes that the movie made to make the story a little bit better were in fact better. So one of the things that I didn't love in this book is that when you're going into it, it feels very clear it feels very obvious that like cannibalism is a metaphor for desire. It's a metaphor for yearning. It's a metaphor for wanting to be wanted, especially in the case of Marin, who has been abandoned by her parents, who has never been able to form a relationship with another person, who's always on the run. Like, this is what she needs. This is what she wants. And the way that her eater qualities take form is that every single time she feels desire towards someone, she inevitably eats them. And apparently in this book, everyone's relationship with their eater qualities is a little different. Like Lee, who is a guy that she meets and who is played by Timothée Chalamet in the movie, his eater qualities come from a place of protection. He only eats people, or he tries to only eat people who have hurt others. Sully, who we'll get into in more depth because I really don't like Sully in this book, not only because he's obviously the antagonist, but like the reveal that happened in this book just like felt super YA. Granted, this is a YA book, but it just like, it felt too whatever. We're gonna get into it. But Sully claims to eat people as they are already dying. So he has like a methodology of like, I'm not just gonna pick someone off the street. I can smell when they're dying, and so then I eat the ones that are already on their way out. Sure, fine, whatever, right? And then you read the author's note and you find out that actually in this book, cannibalism is like a metaphor for veganism, and that totally threw me for a loop. Anyways, let's get into Sully. And this is going to be very spoiler heavy because if you've seen the movies, you know that Sully is just a random guy. He's still the antagonist, but he's just a random guy who has an obsession towards Marin. Sully is a man who has been alone for so long, and Marin is like the first eater that he has come across that has been kind to him. So he like is obsessed with her. He follows her around. It's a whole thing. And obviously Marin, a child, is skeeved out and she doesn't want it. In the book, however, Marin finds solace in Sully. And that part is understandable because he is the first adult person in her life who doesn't fear her, who doesn't push her away, who doesn't make her feel shame for being an eater. And so every single time he shows up, Lee is like, this is weird. How did he know where you were? Why is he following us? Don't you find this weird that he's always here? And Marin is like, no, he's cool. He's my guy. And then she eventually decides to live with Sully. And that's when it's revealed that Sully is actually her grandfather. Not only is he her grandfather, but he is an eater who is trying to eradicate all other eaters. So he like lured her in with kindness to try and eat her, to like kind of end the line of his family of eaters. Because that's another thing that's revealed through the movie and the book, like being an eater seems to be a hereditary quality. And so like that felt a touch YA in the YA fantasy kind of way, where it's like she's the chosen one, so everything like directly correlates with her and her life and she's connected to everything. And I thought that was kind of like a cheesy move to make. The other thing that I didn't like about having her connected to Sully is that in this book, it has been established that there are not a lot of eaters around. And if you are an eater, you are related to another eater. Like, it is, again, a hereditary quality. You get it from your parents. So, like, obviously, Marin has her dad, she has Sully. Lee, on the other hand, doesn't have any information about who his family was, right? He never met his dad. He was never in the picture. His dad could be anyone. And so, just like mathematically, statistically, there are 4 eaters featured in this book. 3 of them are related to each other. Who's to say Lee is not also part of the family tree? And if that's the case, the little romance thing going on between them is gross. Obviously, none of this is like explicitly said, but it's like, again, in the conjectureness of it all, it's like implied that all eaters, or at least all of the eaters that we have been introduced thus far, have been related. Who's to say? I don't know. It's just like, it was a detail that I felt like didn't need to be added because it connected the dots too much in a way that I thought was like weird and gross. I think what I'm trying to say is 2.5 stars. The movie is better, and it is what it is. But on the bright side, with this book, we finished 2 Circles of Hell, and that's great. I then started The Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb, and this would have completed the prompt, read a book that's part of a trilogy, and this is also a book that I have in my 2026 TBR, but I decided to pause on reading this book because it is quite dense. There's a lot of names and places and things to keep track of, and I found myself not being able to like fully wrap my head around this book, especially with like all of the stuff going on in my life in the background. And 2, I like found myself not having anything to say as far as like an update. Like there's nothing really to say here. And that's not to say it's a bad book. I think it's fun. I think it's interesting. However, I would equate this type of fantasy book to like one of those amusement park rides where you're like in a little cart and you're like being pulled through like a series of different rooms and you're like hearing a story. I don't even know the word I'm looking for, but it just like, it feels like a really like passive, like we're receiving the story, we're going along this journey with Fitz, but I just like, I truly didn't have anything to say. So I'm soft DNFing this. I'm going to finish it after this readathon is over, but in order to complete this prompt and to double up, I decided to listen to the Catching Fire audiobook by Suzanne Collins. So I started that, I read it, and I finished that yesterday. That completes the prompts. Read a book that's part of a trilogy, and read a book with a red-orange cover. And like, honestly, I don't really have anything to say about that book either, because this is like the 5th or 6th time that I'm rereading it. But I guess the one thing that I will say is I gave it 5 stars. I always give it 5 stars. And I think this reading experience really solidified Catching Fire as my favorite of the trilogy, just because like the first book is so focused on Katniss and her journey. Like we don't get a lot of information about Panem as a whole. The thing that I love about the series is that we are so honed in on Katniss's POV that if she doesn't know something, we as the reader also don't know that. And I think that's really great as a storytelling device, and I think that makes Katniss frustrating and charming at the same time. But what's great about Catching Fire is that she's being exposed to the rest of Panem in a way that she wasn't before, you know? So we're learning about the other districts, we're learning more about the capital, we're learning more about the victors and what happens to victors after they win. And it just like brings so much into this world. So 5 stars. All of the books get 5 stars, but that one, 5 stars. And today we started Vampires at Sea by Lindsay Mirbaum. And this book is going to complete 2 prompts as well. It is going to complete read a book with a grumpy character and read a book based on the cover. So in this book, we are following 2 vampires. They're not your typical vampires though, because they seem to be like emotional vampires. Hugo seems to feed off of people's misery and sadness, whereas his partner Rebecca seems to feed off of people's like desire. So they're kind of a duo, and they've been a duo for a very long time, and they've recently had a fight, and so they decide to like try and make amends by going on this cruise ship together. And we're following Rebecca, who is my designated grumpy character, and we're following them as they're on this cruise ship. They're kind of like trying to find the perfect person to feed off of, like subsequently and or in addition to someone that they can like invite as a lover. And yet that seems to be a struggle between them because they look for 2 very different things, and so they're kind of at odds at each other, but they're not really addressing the fact that they're at odds with each other, which I think is fascinating on its own, but especially when you consider they've been together for like centuries and there's still like a communication gap between them. But while they're on this boat, they meet a influencer named Heaven, and Heaven is immediately smitten by Hugo, and Hugo is equally immediately smitten by Heaven, and they seem to have like a thing going on. And it's really funny to read because Rebecca obviously sees themselves as kind of like the hot one in the relationship, and that's not to say that Hugo is inherently ugly, but like I don't know, Rebecca just seems a little self-centered, she seems a little narcissistic, she seems a little bitchy, and she seems to be used to being the center of attention. And so there's this one scene that I just read where they were having dinner with Heaven to like get to know them. Rebecca is talking about how she's kind of like primping herself up. She's like pushing her chest out, she's fixing her hair, she's like doing all of the moves that she knows typically works to make her the center of attention, and it's like crickets. Neither Hugo or Heaven are paying attention to her. Neither of them have even noticed her, and when she finally speaks up, they both kind of look surprised that like she's even there. Like they totally forgot that she was seated with them. And so Rebecca is kind of spiraling a little bit because she's so used to being in control, and she's so used to being the leader and so used to being wanted that she doesn't really know what to do with herself now that she's not. And on top of that, heaven may not be the person or thing that they say they are because there is a moment where they all hooked up. Heaven exposes that they are not necessarily human. They have like a snake tail, they have like color changing eyes, they have like snakes in their hair, and Rebecca's like, I know what they are. I'm going to expose it and I'm going to confirm it, and I gotta convince Hugo because we may or may not be in danger. I don't know if Hugo's gonna buy into it though, because like Hugo seems pretty freaking smitten by heaven. This is obviously a relatively short read, and so I think if I focus on it during my lunch break, I'll be able to finish it. I can finish this afternoon and start my next book tonight. I think I'm really like on track to finally escape hell. I hope the next clip isn't like a womp womp kind of clip, but we'll see. I finished Vampires at Sea yesterday like I planned. I gave it 3.5 stars. I thought it was fine. I thought it was interesting. Like, I think I would have liked it more if they weren't vampires, and that's like really weird coming from me because I love a supernatural like kind of element to a story. But like, it would have been just as effective if they were just humans, especially because they weren't like traditional vampires. They were emotional vampires, and it's just like, just call them narcissists and call it a day. But I did find the relationship between Hugh and Rebecca really interesting. The more we started to follow Rebecca, the more we started learning about like the intricacies of how they worked, because like when you're first introduced to them, you're kind of like, how are they together? And then you're like, oh, how are they not together? And then it's like, well, how are they going to continue to be together? And it's just like a really interesting exploration of this one relationship. So overall, not groundbreaking, but you know, well and good, kind of fun. Just wish they weren't emotional vampires. Like, that just like felt silly to me. 2, we started The Hounding yesterday as well. It is interesting so far. I'm like only like 50 pages in, so I don't have a lot to say about it, except for the fact that what I do like about it is that it's told in a lot of different people's perspective. And although the story is about these 5 sisters who are accused of turning into dogs, at this point in time, we're never like following them. We're never in their perspective. We're never in their point of view. We're only gleaning information off of them through the perspective of other people, which I think is a great way of like not only exploring a character, but exploring like that small town, small village like way of how like rumors and gossip and hatred can be easily spread across a community. But what I will say is that it sucks to be in some of these people's point of views. Like, it absolutely is doo-doo garbage. One of the first chapters that we open up with is with a guy who's like the ferry. Like, he brings people from one side of the river to the other, and he recalls this one day where the sisters were on his boat, and he just has this passing thought of like how much power he has over them in this moment, and he gets like really excited about the thought of having so much power over them in this moment. And he's like, I could trap them here, I could do anything I want to them here, and they couldn't do anything. And like, he was kind of like feeding off of their nervousness and their fear, and it was just like so disgusting to be in his POV. But it's like also a POV that's like legit. Like, there are men out there who think like that, you know? So it's kind of like we're exploring these sisters, but we're also like exploring like the darkest part of the people who are in their community and who hate them and who like want to instill violence on them. And it's just like, it's so weird because then you like see these girls and they're just like 5 girls hanging out. And it's just like, why is there so much hatred and violence towards them? It's like, it's so bizarre in the way that like when you write it down plainly, you're like, how can people live like this? And then you like exist in society and you're like, oh, this is normal. Hey, we're gonna do it. We're gonna make it out of hell this year. And I mean both this readathon and metaphorically, because this is the first time all year that I felt not underwater. Like, I woke up this morning and I was like, wait, there's hope and kindness in the world? I don't have a million errands to run and things to fix and things to check in and to look into and whatever? Wow. I like truly feel like I'm back to being a human. But first, let's talk about The Hounding. I really liked it. I gave it 4 stars. I listened to it mostly on audiobook, which is something that's like working for me again now. What I like about it is something that we've already kind of touched on, like it's in the point of view of other community members, so it's like really less about the girls and more about how the community feels about not being able to control the girls. What I like about that is actually a very yucky conversation that we have about society, but I like when books talk about yucky things in really accessible, really poetic ways. But it's not necessarily the community at large that has a problem with these girls. It's one man. And it's the man that we mentioned in the previous update. We kind of had to rush through that scene because my battery was dying, but basically when he's ferrying the sisters across the river, he has that passing thought of, I could stop the boat right now and I could do whatever I wanted to them. He in fact stops the boat and he in fact scares the girls. And he in fact is very thrilled of scaring the girls. That is until the eldest daughter turns to her sisters and is basically like, we don't have to stay here, let's just wade through the water. This man thinks he trapped us, but we have our own devices, let's just fucking go. That pushback really irritated him and it made him feel like less of a man, and now he has it out for these girls because how dare they make him feel less than when he is the guy, right? He's the guy with the boat, everyone depends on him, he's so special, he's the man. Not only is he the man, but he had a vision once where an angel visited him, so he's actually touched by God. And how dare they disrespect someone who was touched by God? And so he kind of runs with this whole thing and he keeps finding things to poke at about these girls to prove that they're demonic, that they're possessed, that they're wrong in some ways, when in reality they are just 5 girls who are independent, who are sure of themselves, and who protect each other. He doesn't like that there's a group of girls, a group of women who live outside of the society norms, especially when these society norms have given him this promise that all women should respect him, and now what the fuck are these girls doing? So as much as I hate that character, I think he's a very fascinating study because he's not a unique man. You know, he's not an outlier of men. In fact, a lot of men feel this way. So although this book takes place in the Victorian age, you know, like this guy, you can find him on like 4chan if that still exists. You can find him on Reddit, you know, like this is a man that still exists, and this is a man that holds a lot of social power. The more people start to believe him and like encourage him to spew this hate, the more powerful he feels. And now he feels like he's getting his like comeuppance in the world, you know, he's been struggling for so long and now God's finally coming through. And then we started our last book last night. And so this final prompt is to like literally just read a book. And so that's what we're doing. And I'm only about 50 pages into Liquid, but I'm already quite obsessed with it. I really like our main protagonist. I really like her vibe. I really like the way she thinks, and I find myself relating a lot to how she thinks and how she like articulates herself. It's really great. Basically in this book we're following a unnamed narrator, and she is kind of super down on her luck. Like she doesn't have a job lined up, her rent increased, her love life is in the trenches, and she like doesn't really know what to do. And now her parents are reaching out to her and are basically kind of doing that thing where it's like, well, like you're in your late 20s, early 30s, like when are you gonna get married? When are you gonna settle down? And so her friend jokingly tells her, we're in the middle of LA, it's not hard to find like a rich person, just marry rich, see what happens, be a sugar baby. And so she decides to take that very literally, and she like sets up an Excel sheet and a timeline and a Gantt chart to make sure that she can do 100 first dates over the course of the summer with the hope of getting engaged before fall semester starts. And I just think she's cool. I think she's really smart. I think she's really fascinating, and I think she's cool. And so I've been really enjoying myself a lot. She's currently on date number 1, and it's not really going well because this guy is kind of annoying, but ain't that the way when you're trying to date a bunch of rich people? But I'm sure our unnamed narrator will figure something out. And by figure something out, I mean she's probably gonna end up with her best friend. There's clearly a vibe there. The last thing I'll say about this book at the moment is the other thing that I like about this is that while it is a love story. And while we can expect that it's going to end in like a happily ever after, likely between her and her best friend, it is also a critique on love and on modern dating and the history of dating. And so like in a lot of ways, it kind of reminds me of The Materialist, like the themes that follow The Materialist, but this is better because it doesn't follow a white lady. Because not only is our unnamed narrator critiquing like the modern dating scene and the apps and all of that, but they're also acknowledging the roles that like racism and colorism and classism play into the modern dating scene. Like, what can I say? I just love a book that absolutely scratches the brain, and it's been a while since I've had a book scratch my brain. So I'm really excited that this book is in fact scratching the brain. Did we do it? That's the big question. And you know what? I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm gonna be super transparent and super real, and I would never lie to you. Technically, no, we didn't. Technically, we had about like 30 pages left of our book Friday night, and if we really wanted to escape hell, we could have persevered and pushed ourselves and forced ourselves to stay awake, but we didn't. And that could be a metaphor about something along the lines of like sticking with the devil you know rather than the devil you don't, etc, etc, etc. We're not going to look that deep into it. What you need to know is that I was very tired. I've had a week, as we've discussed. That week has left my sleeping and energy levels like at an all-time. So as soon as my body is like, girl, you need to lay down, I listen and I lay down. However, that being said, and yet, I'm still going to consider this a win, because like the next day I did finish the book first thing in the morning, and please consider this, I need this win. I don't have a lot of wins under my belt this year, so I desperately need a win. So we're counting this as a win. And like, obviously we did finish Liquid and I enjoyed it a lot. It was nothing like I expected it to be. I went into this thinking that this was like a romantic comedy, kind of like satire-y, kind of silly, goofy time, like super reminiscent to The Husbands by Holly Gramazio, which is one of my favorite books that I read last year, because they both had like a similar-ish kind of premise. Like in this book, our protagonist has a magical attic that like gives her new husbands, and she's kind of like speed dating, and it's kind of like a metaphor for like the modern dating scene and how you're always just looking for the shinier, better object, and then you kind of start desensitizing the people in your apps because they're all just images and prompts and traits that you can like reduce them to. And this one, although does not have any kind of like magical realism or magical kind of anything, follows a woman who is kind of doing the same thing. She's speed dating, she's keeping track of everyone in an Excel sheet, and she also kind of reduces them to like a couple of traits to keep track of who she's seeing. So I was like rearing up for a silly, goofy time. This got very serious in the second half. Got a total change of tone and vibe and scenery and priorities, because our protagonist's father has a heart attack, and so she and her mother have to fly out to Iran and go see him and make sure he's okay, and kind of like settle all of his accounts and make sure his house is being taken care of and all of this other stuff. And so it quickly becomes less of a like romp about the modern dating scene and more about what is love. While she's there with her mother, she starts to examine her parents' relationship, which has been kind of broken. Like, they've never gotten like formally divorced, but they do live in different countries and they only see each other a handful of times a year. But when this happens to her father, her mom is there. So she's kind of like reflecting on that and realizing that although they might not have like a passionate romantic kind of love, there is still love between them, and there is still loyalty, and there's still care and protectiveness and whatever. And it's not necessarily out of obligation, but because they are there for one another. And so throughout this trip, she's like putting these pieces together, she's reflecting on her Excel sheet, and she realizes that the person who has been there from the start, from the jump, was her best friend. And in fact, she can see herself loving him in a more romantic way. And so like, I thought that was really lovely. So in this case, I really like this friends to lover situation because it establishes that there has to be a connection before the romantic love comes into play. I feel like typical romance books that are friends to lovers kind of rubs me the wrong way, because the protagonists don't realize that they're in love with the other person until there's like another person in the way, and they're like, wait, I hate their fiance and now I have to step in. And it just like feels really grimy and unfair for like the unnamed fiance, because like they were also in love with your best friend and they also had like a good thing going, and it's crazy that you just like stepped in there and like destroyed their life when like they were good, you know? Like, sure, maybe the best friend could have had something better with you, but like, who are you to kind of like fuck that up, you know? I just like, I don't like the messiness of friends to lovers when it's like that. Whereas this case, it's very much less of that and more of like a slow burn realization of what this friendship and what this love actually means. It was a really like lovely falling into place kind of story. So I ended up giving this 4.5 stars, and there you have it. We got out of hell a little delayed. We're still considering it a win, but like realistically we failed, but we won. It's kind of like that one scene in the Titanic as like the doors, or Indiana Jones is a better like example that's more familiar, but when like the door is shutting down and then Indiana Jones like slips out and then he like reaches back out to grab his hat, that was me. And I hope that counts for something. This was a long vlog. Didn't post a lot about the behind the scenes personal going-ons of my life on this vlog because that's my right, that's my privacy. But just know, long vlog, long week, but we made it, baby. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you have a great day. I hope you got out of hell, whether literal or metaphorical or literaturally, not like literal, but like book-wise. Anyways, I hope you did, is what I'm trying to say. I hope life is easy on you. And I hope all of your projects are going well. And I will see you in the next one. Bye!